And did you ever think of writing the book?
Yes, I've often thought about writing the book. I mean, I didn't. When he was alive, I was always skeptical of doing this book, just because I felt he would be a pain in the ass to if you went forward with it. And then, by the way, in this conversation with Epstein, as soon as Trump started to run, and he became this key source for me about Trump. And obviously I had begun writing about Trump as of 2016. But afterwards, after he died, I did consider this. And then I think it has become extremely difficult to talk about Epstein in a way that is not entirely focused on his victims, so-called victims. I mean, that became the convention, the media convention. And I think most media, certainly established media outlets, have been very, very, very reluctant to deal with this story. They don't want to deal with this story. It's too, it has a life is too short aspect to it. Everybody feels they're going to get in trouble, say the wrong thing, go in the wrong direction on this story.
Well, I can hear listeners and viewers of this podcast saying, oh my goodness, she let him go unchallenged when you said so-called victims. What do you mean so-called victims? Because we've heard the women's story from the tragic Virginia Giuffre, who also took her own life last month, and who appeared to have a terrible life. And we know that a lot of the women that he ended up soliciting massages from and happy endings from came from sad backgrounds where this was an opportunity for them to crawl their way out. There was a sort of pyramid scheme of the girls at the local high school near Mar-a-Lago passing him on.
Well, we've had, yeah, and I don't disagree with this. I mean, it's just that all we have is a set of depositions. This comes from. This is all obviously there are many. Each of these things creates many more questions. On top of that, everybody is fueled by a financial reward here. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars that have this. Epstein basically ended up supporting the South Florida bar. Clearly he was doing, Jeffrey Epstein had a part of his life, a fairly discreet or secret part of his life was a life devoted to a serious fetishism, abuse, a kind of outside of the context of what many people who were around him knew was going on.
And why do you think that Ghislaine Maxwell hasn't talked more about this and has accepted a 20-year prison sentence?
I assume because you know that much. Why else would you not take a get out of jail ticket?
When did you last talk to him? So you were due to meet him for lunch the day after, or breakfast the day after he was arrested. When did you last speak to him?
I believe that I got the last message from him before he died.
And what was that message?
And this came through one of his lawyers, and on a Friday evening, he died on Saturday morning,
August the 10th.
Yes, and he died theoretically by hanging himself. And his message to me hours before this happened was, and it was just in response to me asking, how he was, and he said, "Still hanging around."
He literally said, "Still hanging around." And do you think that was a coded message?
No, I I don't know. I mean, it was in character. Everything that he said was cast in amusing, unserious, ironic. I'm not sure I ever quite heard him say utter an entirely serious sentence. And again, remember, and I think I think it is vital to understand this story, that there is at the center of this a relationship between two men who are doing the same, just involved in the same thing, who are living their similar lives. They have the same interests: girls, money, not working, living this sybaritic life, and one ends up dead in the darkest prison in America, and one ends up in the White House.
When Elon Musk and Donald Trump had their big blow up, Elon Musk tweeted about Epstein and then later deleted the tweet saying he'd gone too far. Why do you think he deleted that tweet?
I think probably it was trying to recover some semblance of a civil relationship. I think he probably realized he had a lot at risk here. And I think he realized he had touched, that Epstein is, for Donald Trump, a third rail.
It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Well, thank you very much for coming on and talking about it. I would refer people to the chapter in your book, Too Famous, which has an amazing transcript of the conversation that you witnessed there with Steve Bannon and Jeffrey Epstein and Ehud Barak, who arrives in the middle of it and asks for a boiled egg with caviar, or possibly an omelette with caviar.
He doesn't want the omelette. He wants the caviar.
Just wants the caviar. But there's some egg in there as well. And I remember thinking, well, this is clearly a very heady environment. And there appeared to be no girls at that. I think it was taking place in the morning.
Yeah, no, I don't. I mean, the girls at Epstein's house, and I never went to Epstein's island or the house in Palm Beach. I mean, I've been to the house in Paris and the house in New the girls were. I mean, I never had any sense that these girls were younger than they should be, although they weren't old. They were 20, say, and they sort of functioned as assistants, partly, kind of, room decorations. They sort of fluttered around the edges. I mean, they certainly weren't in any way central to anything that was going on.
And were the guests solely men, or were there women of substance there too?
There were a couple of women of substance.
Who were they?
Women of enormous substance. So,
can you give us a clue?
I can't. I mean, I could, but
you're saving it. Are you saving it for the book?
I do feel that, I mean, of the many, there are many people associated with Epstein, and it has become difficult for everybody. So I sort of feel, especially with the women involved, that that they don't. I mean, if no one knows who they are, it's kind of, why not leave it like that?
Well, because presumably somebody knows who they are. Are you saving this for your book?
No, I'm just. I mean, in one instance, I had made a promise about this. when you're threading this needle, and I'm in this awkward position of being both a journalist in this environment and then someone who was shared a lot of confidences, just because that seems to be this happens to me in many situations, because I kind of fade into the woodwork. I'm there taking notes. We're having a recorder on, and people forget about this. So they don't know if I'm their friend or I'm the reporter in the midst.
Well, I can't believe that anybody wouldn't understand you were the reporter in the midst.
You'd be surprised. I mean, there's a whole, 7 months in the Trump White House.
Yeah, for Fire and Fury.
They didn't seem to quite register that.
Fascinating. Well, Michael, as ever, very interesting talking to you, and come back and talk to us soon.
Anytime.
This podcast was produced by Devon Rogerino, Anna von Ursen, and it was edited by Jesse Millward.